She found him dying beside his horse, arrows still in his back. Unaware, he was the last of his line. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The sun was setting behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the barren landscape of the desert. Sarah James had been traveling for hours, the dust swirling around her horse's hooves as the dry heat weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had been riding alone for weeks, searching for her brother, who had gone missing after a skirmish with local bandits. It had been a difficult journey, but Sarah was determined. She pushed forward, her heart heavy with worry and the hope that she would find him before it was too late. The moment she rounded the corner of a jagged rock formation, she saw him. There, lying motionless beside his horse, was a man. The arrows lodged deep in his back were unmistakable, and the sight made Sarah's heart drop. She quickly dismounted and rushed toward him, her hands trembling as she knelt beside him. His face was pale, the once proud warrior now a victim of a brutal attack. His breathing was shallow, and he barely stirred as she touched his arm. Sarah knew nothing about the man, but the instinct to help was overpowering. She could feel the weight of his life slipping away, and in that moment, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let him die alone. She moved quickly, tearing strips from her cloak to fashion a makeshift bandage for his wounds. Her mind raced as she tried to stem the bleeding, her fingers slick with blood. "Please," she whispered, almost begging, "hold on." But the man did not respond, his dark eyes staring into nothingness. Sarah could tell he had been left for dead, abandoned in the middle of the desert. She couldn't understand why, but she knew she couldn't just leave him like this. She carefully lifted him into her arms, gritting her teeth. As she carried him to the shade of a nearby tree, her strength was waning, but her resolve was stronger than ever. With the last of her energy, she worked to keep him alive, feeding him water and using the few medical supplies she had left. As the hours passed, the man's condition did not improve, but Sarah refused to give up. The moon had risen high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the desert landscape when he finally stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, Sarah was unsure if he was seeing her or if he had passed into another world. But then, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he spoke. "Who are you?" The words were thick with exhaustion, but they carried a weight of something more. Sarah hesitated, unsure of what to say. "I'm Sarah. I found you. I couldn't leave you to die out here." He blinked, his gaze drifting over her face as if searching for recognition. I'm the last of my people," he muttered, his voice breaking. His words were so faint, Sarah almost couldn't hear them, but they hit her like a punch to the chest. She looked at him, her heart sinking as she understood. This man wasn't just anyone. He was someone important. She had saved him, but in doing so, she had unwittingly tied her fate to his. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice full of gratitude and despair. "Now, I must protect you, for the bond between us is unbreakable." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as the weight of his words settled in. She didn't know what this meant, but one thing was clear. She had just stepped into a world far bigger than herself, and nothing would ever be the same again. As Sarah knelt by the warrior's side, her fingers pressed gently against his skin, feeling his faint pulse beneath the rough exterior of his leather armor. The firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The man's breathing had steadied, but his eyes remained closed, his body still too weak from the wounds that had nearly claimed his life. Sarah had managed to save him, but she had no idea what this would mean for her or why she had been chosen to save him. The weight of the situation hung heavily on her shoulders, and with each passing hour, it became clear that her actions had set in motion something far beyond her understanding. As the cool desert night air wrapped around them, Sarah sat up straight, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. She had been isolated in this desolate place, far from civilization, with no family and no true sense of belonging. But now, her fate was intertwined with this man's, and whatever this bond was, it could change everything. The warrior's eyes fluttered open again, this time with more clarity. He seemed to be searching for something, his gaze fixing on Sarah. "Who are you?" he asked once more, his voice hoarse but stronger. "Why did you help me?" Sarah met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She had not expected this moment to come so soon, and the intensity in his eyes made her words feel small and insignificant. "I told you already," she replied quietly. "I couldn't leave you to die out here. You needed help, and I couldn't just walk away." The warrior's expression softened slightly, but there was still something deep in his eyes, something heavy, like the weight of an ancient promise. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders rising and falling with the effort. "You saved me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You saved my life. And for that, you are now bound to me, to my people." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The words echoed in her mind like a distant thunderclap, the weight of their meaning sinking in. Bound. To him? To his people? She had only done what anyone with a heart would have done, helped a man in need. But she had not expected this. "What do you mean?" she asked, a mix of confusion and apprehension creeping into her voice. The warrior's gaze grew more intense. "You saved my life," he repeated, "and now you are part of my tribe. The bond between us is not just one of survival. It is one of protection, of honor." Sarah didn't know how to respond. Her mind reeled, and she felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of responsibility weighing her down. She had saved him, but now she was involved in something far bigger than she had anticipated. "My people, they will need to know what you have done," the warrior continued, his voice low, but steady. "They will need to understand that you are no longer just a stranger. You are one of us now." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She had come into this wilderness alone, with no intention of staying, no intention of joining anyone's tribe. She had simply wanted to find her brother and return to her life. But now, she was caught in something that felt like fate, like destiny had intervened in a way she could not yet understand. The warrior took a deep breath, his expression solemn. "You have shown courage, and for that, you will be honored." He struggled to sit up, wincing with pain, but his determination was clear. "I will take you to my people. They will understand the bond we now share." Sarah's heart raced. The thought of traveling with this stranger to his people, a tribe she knew little about, filled her with uncertainty. She had no idea what to expect, but something in the warrior's demeanor told her that this was no ordinary man. He had lived through unimaginable hardships, and now his fate, and hers, was tied together in a way she could not deny. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Sarah admitted, her voice shaking. The warrior smiled, but it was a grim smile, full of understanding. "You may not be ready, but you have already made the choice. There is no turning back now." The words hung in the air, and Sarah realized that she was standing at the crossroads of her life. Everything had changed in an instant. There was no going back to the way things were. The warrior took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and helped her to her feet. "Come with me," he said. "The journey is long, but we must begin. We have a new path ahead of us, together." As they walked through the desert, Sarah could not help but wonder what the future held. What would it mean to be part of this warrior's world? What would her life look like now, bound to a tribe and to a man she barely knew? But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The night air felt cooler now, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever before. Sarah had no idea what lay ahead, but she knew that she would face it with courage. For better or worse, she was no longer alone in this world. The journey to the warrior's tribe was long and grueling, stretching over miles of rugged desert terrain that seemed to stretch endlessly under the blistering sun. Sarah struggled to keep up, her legs sore and her body exhausted. But the warrior, despite his injuries, moved with the grace and strength of someone accustomed to this harsh land. She had never imagined that her simple rescue of a man, a stranger, would lead her into such a world she was now a part of, whether she wanted to be or not. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an amber glow across the vast expanse of the desert, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressed down on her chest. They were close to his tribe, that much she could tell by the way the warrior began to pick up his pace. She looked around, taking in the desert that was slowly transforming into something more. Rock formations that seemed to emerge from the earth like ancient sentinels, and the faint smell of smoke carried on the wind. She didn't know what to expect when they reached his people, but she was certain that her life, the one she had known up until now, would be left behind. As night began to fall, they finally reached the edge of a hidden valley. It was here, in this secluded place, that the warriors' tribe made their home. The village was nothing like what Sarah had imagined. There were no grand buildings or bustling streets. Instead, there were simple structures made of wood and animal hides, arranged in a circle around a large fire pit at the center. The fire flickered in the cool, desert air, casting long shadows on the faces of the people who sat around it. The warriors' tribe was small, but from the way they carried themselves, Sarah could tell that they were a fierce and proud people. They were unlike anyone she had ever met. As the warrior and Sarah approached the fire, the tribe grew silent, their eyes trained on the two newcomers. Some of them whispered among themselves, their faces unreadable, but Sarah could sense the tension in the air. She was an outsider, a stranger to these people, and she knew that her presence here would not be taken lightly. The warrior spoke to the group in a language Sarah didn't understand, his voice low and steady. He introduced her as the one who had saved his life, the one who had shown courage and honor. As he spoke, the tribe's leader, an older man with a long gray beard and a piercing gaze, stepped forward. The leader studied Sarah for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he weighed her worth. Sarah held her breath, unsure of what would happen next. Finally, the leader spoke. "You have saved one of our own," he said in broken English, his voice rough but strong. "For that, you will be honored. You are no longer just a stranger." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. Honored? She didn't feel like she deserved any honor. She had only done what anyone would have done. She had helped a man in need. But the tribe's leader was not finished. "But," he continued, his gaze never leaving hers, "you are now bound to us. The bond between you and our people is sacred. We will protect you, as you have protected one of us." Sarah's mind raced. She didn't understand. She had saved this man's life. Yes, but what did that have to do with her becoming part of this tribe? What did it mean to be bound to them? Before she could say anything, the leader gestured toward a woman standing nearby. The woman was older, with a strong face weathered by time, but her eyes were kind. She stepped forward and took Sarah's hand, leading her toward a nearby tent. "Come," the woman said softly. "You must prepare. You will join our tribe, and with that comes a responsibility." Sarah followed her, still in a daze, unable to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. As they entered the tent, the woman began to explain the customs of the tribe, their ways of life, and what would happen next. Sarah listened intently, but her mind kept drifting back to the warrior, the man she had saved. He was the last of his line, and she had no idea what that meant. What did it mean for her? What did it mean for them both? The night passed quickly, and by morning, Sarah was ready to face her new reality. She was no longer just Sarah. James, the lost traveler. She was part of something larger now, something she had not asked for, but was now bound to. As she stepped outside the tent, she saw the warrior standing by the fire, watching her with those piercing eyes. He had healed overnight, but his gaze still held the weight of someone who had seen too much. He was no longer just a man she had saved. He was her connection to this tribe, to this new life. And as they walked toward the center of the village, she knew that everything had changed. Her fate was now tied to theirs, and there was no going back. As the days passed, Sarah began to adjust to her new life within the tribe. The mornings were spent learning the ways of the people, how they hunted, gathered, and lived in harmony with the harsh desert landscape. The warrior, whose name was now revealed to be Takoda, remained a constant presence by her side. He was the one who had introduced her to the tribe, the one who had saved her life, and the one whose fate was now tied to hers. Takoda had once been a fierce leader, but now he was the last of his people, the last of a warrior line that had been decimated by years of conflict and tragedy. Sarah could see the weight of his past in the way he moved. His every step seemed burdened by a history he could never escape. One evening, as the sun set and the stars began to emerge in the vast sky, Takoda took Sarah aside. They were sitting near the fire, the other members of the tribe watching them from a distance. The flames crackled softly in the night air, casting shadows across Takoda's face. He had not spoken much about his past, and Sarah had never pressed him. But tonight, it seemed as though he was ready to share. "You've done much for me," he said, his voice low and steady. You saved my life when others would have left me to die. Sarah looked at him, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what she had done. She had never thought of it as anything special. She had just done what any decent person would do, help a man in need. But Takoda seemed to carry it with him, as though her actions had changed the course of his life. You saved me, he continued, his gaze fixed on the fire. And now, I must protect you. I am the last of my line, Sarah. My people are gone, and I have nothing left but the land and the tribe I now lead. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had never thought about the implications of what it meant to be bound to Takoda, to this tribe. She had saved him, but he had saved her in return. He had brought her into his world, and now she was part of it, inextricably tied to the fate of his people. You are not just a stranger anymore, Takoda said, his voice tinged with sorrow. You are a part of us, and the bond we share is one of honor and protection. Sarah nodded slowly, trying to process his words. She had no idea what the future would hold, but she knew she could not walk away from this. She could not walk away from him. As the days wore on, Sarah began to learn more about the tribe's customs. They were a people of great strength and resilience, their lives shaped by the harsh desert and the battles they had fought over the centuries. Despite the challenges they faced, there was a deep sense of community, a bond that ran through every member of the tribe. They relied on each other, and in return, they gave everything for the survival of the group. Sarah was slowly becoming one of them, though it was not without its struggles. She had to prove herself, to show that she was worthy of the honor they had bestowed upon her. She learned to ride a horse with the same skill as the others. She learned the ways of hunting and gathering, and she learned the stories of the tribe's past, passed down through generations. But even as she grew closer to them, there was still a part of her that felt like an outsider. The memories of her old life, the life she had left behind, lingered in the back of her mind. She missed her home, her family, and the life she had known. But as the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to realize that this new life was her destiny. She had been brought here for a reason, and her place in this world was now clear. One morning, after the tribe had returned from a successful hunt, Takoda approached Sarah. He had been quiet lately, and Sarah knew that something was weighing on his mind. Sarah, he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, there is something you must know. The fate of our tribe, of our people, lies in your hands now. You are not just a protector of life. You are now the one who will help lead us into the future. Sarah was taken aback by his words. Me? She asked, her voice trembling. I'm not a leader. I don't know the first thing about leading a tribe. Takoda placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip strong and reassuring. You have shown more courage than any warrior I have known. You saved me, and now it is time for you to step into your role as the protector of our future. Sarah stared at him, her mind spinning. She had come to this tribe as a stranger, with no plans to stay, and now, she was being asked to lead them? To be the one to protect their future? It was a responsibility she had never imagined, and yet, something deep inside her told her that this was where she belonged. This was her path, and she would walk it, no matter where it led. The weight of the tribe's expectations was heavy, but Sarah knew one thing for sure. She would never walk away from this. She would fight for the tribe, for Takoda, and for the future they would build together. The following days were marked by a rising sense of responsibility that weighed heavily on Sarah. She had been thrust into a role she never expected, a role she wasn't sure she was ready for. Takoda had promised her the leadership of their people, but as the tribe gathered around her, she could feel their eyes on her, expectant, curious, and unsure. The weight of their expectations was a constant pressure, and every decision she made seemed to carry the weight of their future. Her days began early, filled with lessons and observations about the tribe's ways of life. The tribe was small, but their hearts were fierce, and their traditions ran deep. Sarah learned quickly that leadership was not about giving orders, but about earning respect and trust. She spent countless hours learning the intricacies of their culture, their history, and the delicate balance they maintained with the land. But despite her efforts, doubt lingered in her mind. Could she truly lead them? Could she protect them the way Takoda had done for so many years? As the days passed, Sarah felt more and more like a stranger in her own skin. Her old life felt like a distant memory, a life she could no longer return to. She had become part of something much larger than herself, and with that came a profound sense of loss, but also a growing sense of purpose. It was on the 6th day, as Sarah was sitting by the fire with Takoda, that she received her first true test. A group of nomadic raiders, men from a neighboring tribe, had been spotted on the outskirts of their territory. Takoda's expression hardened as he heard the news. He had been expecting trouble, but the appearance of these raiders was earlier than he had anticipated. The tribe had been preparing for months for such a confrontation, but now that it was here, Sarah felt the full weight of her responsibilities. She looked to Takoda for guidance, but his eyes were focused on the horizon. "We have no choice," he said, his voice steady but grim. "They will test our strength, our resolve. We must defend what we have built." Sarah nodded, her heart racing in her chest. She had never been in a real battle before, and the thought of it terrified her. But she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where she could prove herself to the tribe, to Takoda, and most importantly, to herself. The battle was fierce. The raiders were skilled, but they underestimated the unity and resolve of Takoda's people. Sarah found herself in the thick of it, standing by Takoda's side as they fought to protect their land. She had never felt more alive, the adrenaline pumping through her veins as she fought alongside the warriors she had come to respect. As the hours wore on, the raiders began to retreat. Their forces were no match for the strength and determination of Takoda's people. When the battle finally ended, Sarah stood there, breathless, covered in dirt and blood, but with a fierce sense of pride. She had done it. She had protected her people. Takoda looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of respect and admiration. "You did well," he said, his voice full of pride. Sarah's heart swelled at his words. She had passed her first test, and in doing so, she had proven that she was capable of leading, of protecting, and of living up to the legacy of the warrior she had saved. That night, as the tribe gathered around the fire, Sarah felt a deep sense of connection to them. She was no longer an outsider. She was one of them, bound by honor, by sacrifice, and by the unbreakable bond they shared. Takoda stood beside her, his presence a steady reminder of the strength they had built together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Sarah felt ready to face whatever came next. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she knew she would not face it alone. She had found her place, and she would fight to protect it with everything she had. The days following the raid brought a new sense of unity within the tribe. Sarah had proven herself in battle, but now, the tribe looked to her for guidance and leadership. Takoda, though still a powerful figure, recognized the growing strength in Sarah. He was no longer the sole protector of his people. Now, they were bound by a shared responsibility. Yet, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges they had faced so far were only the beginning. The tribe had been through countless battles, yet she could sense the uncertainty in the air, like the calm before a storm. One morning, as Sarah practiced her skills with the bow, Takoda approached her. His face was grim, his eyes scanning the horizon, as if searching for something far off. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but filled with concern, "there is something coming. I can feel it in the wind." Sarah lowered her bow, her heart quickening at the tone of his voice. Takoda had never spoken like this before. "What do you mean?" she asked. Takoda's gaze was unwavering. "I have heard rumors from the other tribes. There is a war brewing between the nations. We have lived in peace for a long time, but now, things are changing." Sarah felt a chill run through her. The idea of war was something she had never fully grasped before, but it was no longer just an abstract concept. It was a real threat that loomed over them. "We must prepare," Takoda continued. "Our people have always been strong, but if we are to survive what is coming, we need unity. We need to stand together, not just as a tribe, but as a force that cannot be broken." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She had been prepared for challenges, but nothing had quite prepared her for the weight of this responsibility. It was one thing to lead in times of peace, but leading in the face of war was something else entirely. The days that followed were filled with urgency. The tribe worked together, gathering supplies, strengthening defenses, and training for the conflict ahead. Sarah was involved in every aspect of preparation, from teaching the younger members how to defend themselves to strategizing with Takoda and the elders. They were no longer just protecting their land from small raids. Now, they were preparing for a war that could threaten their very existence. As the first signs of battle approached, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos of the past few days, the uncertainty, the fear, all of it seemed to fade as she stood alongside her people, ready to face the storm head-on. The night before the battle, Takoda called Sarah to his side. The camp was quiet, the only sounds being the crackle of the fire and the soft rustle of the desert wind. "Tomorrow, we face what we have been preparing for," he said, his voice low but resolute. "But no matter what happens, know that you are not alone. You are part of something much larger now, Sarah. You are a leader of this tribe, and you will be remembered as one of the great protectors of our people." Sarah felt a surge of emotion at his words. She had never asked for this responsibility, but now it felt like a part of her. She was not just a stranger who had stumbled into this world. She was a warrior, a protector, and a leader in her own right. The next day, the battle began. The horizon was filled with the dust of approaching warriors, the thundering sound of hooves echoing through the desert. The tribe stood together, their weapons ready, their hearts focused. Sarah stood alongside Takoda, her bow drawn, her mind clear. As the battle raged, Sarah fought with a fierce determination. She could feel the power of the tribe coursing through her, their strength and resilience becoming her own. She fought not just for her survival, but for the survival of everything she had come to love, the tribe, the land, and the future they were building together. Hours passed, the battle growing fiercer with each moment. But eventually, the tide began to turn. The enemy forces, though strong, were no match for the unity and determination of Takoda's tribe. As the last of the raiders fled, Sarah stood in the midst of the battlefield, her body covered in dirt and blood, but her heart filled with pride. They had won, but it was not just a victory of strength. It was a victory of unity, of courage, and of the unbreakable bond between the people. Takoda approached her, his face hard but his eyes filled with pride. "You have done it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are a true leader now, Sarah. Our people will remember this day, and they will remember you." Sarah smiled, exhausted but filled with a sense of fulfillment. She had faced her greatest challenge yet, and she had emerged victorious. The battle was over, but the journey was far from complete. The future of the tribe was still uncertain, but Sarah knew one thing for sure. She would face it with courage, alongside Takoda and the people who had become her family. Together, they would survive whatever the future held. The aftermath of the battle left the tribe both victorious and somber. While the raiders had been driven off, the toll of the fight weighed heavily on everyone. The victory was hard-won, and Sarah found herself in the midst of it all, exhausted, bruised, but with a deeper sense of purpose than she had ever felt before. The sun dipped below the horizon as the tribe began to regroup. The wounded were tended to, and the fallen were honored. Sarah moved among her people, helping where she could, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. She had fought alongside them, bled with them, and now, more than ever, she felt the unbreakable bond that held them together. Takoda watched her from across the camp, his eyes following her every movement. He had been proud of her during the battle, but now, as they took stock of their losses, he saw something more. Sarah had proven herself in the heat of battle, but this was where true leadership was born, in the quiet moments of recovery. As the tribe gathered around the fire that night, the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces, Takoda stood before them, his voice carrying through the night air. "Today, we faced our enemy and stood together," he said. "We are stronger because of it, and we honor those who gave their lives for our survival." His gaze shifted to Sarah, and for a moment, the whole tribe seemed to follow his lead. "But today, we also recognize the strength of our newest leader, Sarah." The words hung in the air, and Sarah felt the weight of them. She had never asked for this role, but the time had come to accept it fully. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't come here seeking power or leadership," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I came here because I believe in this tribe, in all of you. We are bound together now, and together, we will face whatever comes our way." The tribe erupted in a quiet cheer, their voices low but filled with conviction. In that moment, Sarah understood. Leadership wasn't about authority or titles. It was about earning trust, standing beside your people, and leading them through the darkest times. Takoda smiled, his pride in her evident. "You are ready," he said simply, his voice full of respect. The fire crackled in the background, the warmth of the flames wrapping around them all. But Sarah knew that the true heat came from the unity of the tribe, from their shared commitment to survive and thrive together. Days passed, and the tribe's resolve grew stronger. Sarah took on more responsibilities, working alongside Takoda and the other elders to guide the tribe in the aftermath of the battle. Their resources were strained, but their spirits were unbroken. The threat of war still loomed on the horizon, but Sarah knew they were prepared. They had survived worse, and they would survive this too. As Sarah stood atop a hill overlooking the valley one evening, Takoda approached her, his steps quiet behind her. "It is a hard thing to lead," he said, his voice soft in the evening air. "But you do it with grace." Sarah turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "I do it because I must," she replied. "I do it for the tribe, for you, and for what we've all fought for." Takoda nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "You are the future of this tribe, Sarah. You have already proven that." The weight of his words settled deep within her. Sarah had fought for her place here, had earned the respect of the tribe through her actions, her courage, and her heart. But even as the tribe healed, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging thought that still lingered in the back of her mind. She had taken on a responsibility she never expected, and though she had proven herself time and time again, the burden of leadership was a heavy one. The days grew shorter, and the harsh winds of winter began to sweep through the valley. But in the face of the challenges ahead, Sarah stood firm, her resolve unshaken. With Takoda by her side, and the tribe's unwavering loyalty, she knew they would face whatever came next. Together, they would endure, they would protect their people, and they would build a future that would carry their legacy forward, no matter the cost. The fire burned brightly that night, its warmth and light a symbol of everything they had fought for. And as Sarah stood beside the fire, surrounded by the tribe that had become her family, she realized that this was her home now. The journey ahead was uncertain, but with the tribe behind her, she was ready to face it head-on. The days after the battle seemed to stretch on, but life in the tribe was slowly returning to a semblance of normalcy. The wounds of war had been tended to, both physical and emotional, and Sarah found herself adjusting to the weight of her new responsibilities with more ease than she ever expected. Yet, even as she moved forward, she could not shake the feeling that the peace they had fought for was fragile. The air felt thick with tension, and every glance exchanged between the tribe members seemed to carry unspoken questions about the future. Takoda had always been a figure of calm and certainty, but even he could not hide the concern in his eyes when he spoke of the future. One evening, as Sarah sat by the fire with him, watching the flames flicker and dance in the cool desert air, Takoda spoke of the looming uncertainty. "The raiders we fought are not the only threat," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "There are others who will test us, who will try to break the peace we have fought so hard to build." Sarah turned to him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Takoda's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself stood still. "We do what we have always done," he said. "We stand together." Sarah nodded, but deep within her, a feeling of unease began to settle. Standing together had been enough in the past, but now the stakes felt much higher. The tribe was no longer just surviving. They were protecting everything they had built. The responsibility, she felt, seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. She had not asked for this role, but now, it seemed inescapable. Days turned into weeks, and the tribe remained on high alert. They fortified their borders, trained their warriors, and kept their eyes peeled for any signs of an impending threat. But despite their efforts, there was a sense of foreboding in the air, a feeling that the worst was yet to come. Sarah spent her days with Takoda, learning more about the inner workings of the tribe, about strategy, and about the ways of leadership. She no longer saw herself as an outsider, but as a part of something much larger than herself. Yet, there were times when she questioned her own ability to lead them through what was coming. One day, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert, Takoda gathered the tribe around the central fire. Sarah joined him, standing by his side, her heart pounding in her chest. The fire crackled and popped, the scent of wood smoke filling the air. The tribe was silent, waiting for Takoda's words. "We have all worked hard to keep our peace, to defend our home," he said, his voice strong and steady. But now, the time has come for us to face the future head-on. We must be prepared for what comes next. We will not be caught off guard again. Sarah's eyes scanned the faces of the tribe members around her. They were warriors, men and women of strength and courage, but there was something different in their eyes. Tonight, they were all looking to her now. It was no longer just about survival. It was about securing their future. The weight of their trust was a burden she didn't take lightly. As Takoda finished speaking, he turned to Sarah, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You are ready," he said quietly. "You have earned your place as our leader. The time has come for you to stand beside me, not as a protector, but as a partner." His words hit her like a bolt of lightning. She had been leading them, yes, but never with this much weight, this much responsibility. "I'm not sure I can do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted this." Takoda placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "You are stronger than you know, Sarah. You have always been ready for this. Trust yourself and trust us." His words brought a sense of calm over her, but also a new understanding of what she was about to face. This was her path now, and she would not walk it alone. The tribe stood together, as they always had, but now Sarah stood at the forefront, alongside Takoda. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would face it as a united force, no matter what came their way. That night, as Sarah lay in her tent, she thought of the journey ahead. She had been thrust into this role, but now, it was hers to define. The tribe's survival depended on her decisions, her leadership, and her ability to guide them through the challenges that awaited them. The winds of change were blowing, and Sarah was ready to face whatever came next, standing strong alongside her people. She was no longer just a healer or a protector. She was a leader, and her journey was only beginning. The days following Takoda's declaration were filled with a quiet, focused energy. Sarah felt the weight of leadership on her shoulders more than ever. The tribe had accepted her, but the true test of her abilities as a leader was still ahead. Takoda, ever the steady guide, worked alongside her, helping her understand the complexities of leadership. He knew that the hardest battles were not fought on the battlefield, but in the heart and mind. Sarah had seen enough of the violence that came with survival, but this was different. This was about ensuring the future of the tribe, keeping them united, and guiding them through the challenges of a changing world. But Sarah couldn't shake the nagging feeling that their troubles were far from over. There had been rumors, whispers from other tribes about movements on the horizon, about alliances forming with enemies who had once been rivals. The peace that Takoda's tribe had fought for so fiercely was fragile. One evening, as the wind began to cool the desert air, Takoda approached Sarah, his face serious as always, but with a quiet urgency in his voice. "Sarah," he said, his gaze locking onto hers. "The time is coming. The signs are clear. We must prepare." She felt her heart skip a beat. "Prepare for what?" she asked, trying to steady her breath. Takoda's eyes softened, but his words carried the weight of everything he had seen in his life. "War is coming," he said simply. "We have seen the signs before. The other tribes are aligning, and they are restless. We have two choices: prepare for battle, or risk losing everything we've worked for." Sarah stood still, the enormity of his words crashing over her like a wave. She had fought, she had led, but this was different. This was not just about surviving. It was about the future of everything they held dear. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but she knew that she could not back down. She had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. The next few days were spent in preparation. Sarah worked closely with Takoda, learning from him how to strategize, how to assess their resources, and how to unite the tribe under a single purpose. The tribe rallied around her, their trust in her growing stronger with every decision she made. But Sarah still couldn't shake the fear that had taken root in her heart. The stakes had never been higher, and she was afraid of what would happen if she failed. One night, as the fire flickered and the stars stretched across the sky, Sarah sat outside her tent, staring into the flames. Takoda joined her, sitting silently beside her. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Sarah turned to him. "How do you do it?" she asked quietly. "How do you carry this weight and still lead with such certainty?" Takoda looked at her, his gaze steady but warm. "The weight of leadership is never easy to bear," he said. "But you do not carry it alone. You are not alone in this, Sarah. The tribe stands with you, and together, We will face whatever comes. His words offered some comfort, but Sarah knew that the battle ahead would not be easy. The next morning, the tribe's warriors gathered around the central fire, ready to begin the preparations for what they knew would be a fight for their very survival. Sarah stood at the front, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. Takoda stood beside her, his presence a constant reminder that she was not alone in this fight. As the warriors began to prepare for the coming battle, Sarah addressed them, her voice strong and steady. "We stand together," she said, her words carrying the weight of everything they had worked for. "We fight for each other, for our families, and for the future of our people. We will not back down. We will protect what is ours." The warriors cheered, their spirits lifted by her words. Sarah could feel the strength of the tribe around her, their unity and resolve like a shield. As the preparations continued, Sarah knew that the battle ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced. But she also knew that they were ready. They had fought for this peace, and they would fight to keep it. The days turned into nights, and the final moments before the battle arrived. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, looking out over the desert, the moonlight casting a soft glow over the landscape. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her here, the tribe, Takoda, and the strength she had found within herself. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. The tribe would face this challenge together, and together, they would endure. As the first light of dawn began to break, signaling the start of the battle, Sarah stood tall, her heart steady, and her eyes focused on the horizon. This was their moment. This was their fight, and they would not lose. The morning of the battle arrived with a quiet tension that settled over the tribe like the stillness before a storm. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the first light of dawn began to creep over the desert. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and fire, the kind of morning that felt like a moment of calm before everything changed. The warriors were ready, their weapons sharp, their minds focused. Sarah could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. Takoda stood by her side, his presence steady and reassuring. He had led this tribe through countless challenges, but today, the leadership would fall to her. "We fight for more than just survival today," Takoda said, his voice low but strong. "We fight for the future of our people, for everything we have built." Sarah nodded, her heart racing, but her resolve unshaken. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the test of everything she had learned. The battle wasn't just about physical strength. It was about unity, strategy, and the strength of the bonds they had forged. Takoda's eyes met hers. "You have earned this, Sarah. Trust in yourself and in the people you lead." Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling into her. She had learned so much from him, from the tribe, and now it was time to lead them into the fight. The tribe's warriors were positioned, ready to defend their land. But Sarah knew this would not be an easy fight. The enemy had underestimated them before, and now they would see the full strength of the tribe. The ground trembled with the approach of the enemy, their war cries echoing through the canyon. The time had come. Sarah gave the signal, and the warriors sprang into action, moving with the precision and speed that only a united tribe could achieve. The battle raged fiercely, the air thick with the clash of weapons and the cries of the combatants. Sarah fought with a focus and determination she had never known, every movement deliberate and calculated. Her heart was steady, her mind clear. She could feel the presence of her people around her, the power of their unity strengthening her every step. The enemy, though formidable, could not match the resolve of Takoda's tribe. Sarah moved like a force of nature, her instincts guiding her as she fought alongside the warriors. She was not just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for the future, for the tribe, for Takoda. The battle raged on, hours seeming to stretch into eternity, but Sarah never lost focus. She could feel the tribe's strength, their determination, and it gave her the courage to push forward. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Sarah saw a figure, a warrior from the enemy's ranks, someone she hadn't noticed before. He was larger than the others, his movements more deliberate, his eyes focused with a deadly intensity. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she realized who he was. It was the leader of the enemy tribe, the one who had orchestrated the attacks that had led them to this moment. He was coming straight for her. Without thinking, Sarah moved into position, drawing her bow and taking aim. The leader's eyes locked onto hers. A challenge passed between them. Time seemed to slow as she released the arrow, watching it fly with deadly accuracy. But the leader was faster than she had anticipated. He twisted at the last moment, the arrow grazing his arm but not bringing him down. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as he charged toward her, a look of fury in his eyes. She had no time to react before he was upon her, his sword raised. But just as the blade came crashing down, a flash of movement appeared. Takoda, moving like a shadow, intercepting the strike with his own weapon. The two warriors clashed, their blades ringing out in the chaos of the battlefield. Sarah stumbled back, watching as Takoda fought with all his might. She could see the strength in his movements, the precision, the experience that had earned him the title of leader. But the enemy leader was no slouch. The fight was brutal, both warriors equally matched in strength and skill. Sarah felt a surge of fear as she watched Takoda struggle against the relentless attacks. She knew she couldn't just stand by and watch. With a newfound resolve, Sarah grabbed her own weapon, rushing toward the two combatants. She would not let Takoda fall. She could feel the energy of the battle surging through her as she closed the distance between them. Just as the enemy leader raised his blade for the final blow, Sarah acted. She leaped forward, striking with a fierce determination, and knocked the weapon from the enemy leader's hand. The force of the strike sent him staggering back, momentarily stunned. Takoda took advantage of the moment, delivering a decisive blow that sent the enemy leader to the ground, defeated. The battle raged on, but the tide had turned. Sarah's quick thinking, her bravery, and her ability to fight alongside the warriors had made all the difference. As the enemy retreated, Sarah stood with her people, bloodied but victorious. The tribe had won, but it wasn't just a victory on the battlefield. It was a victory of unity, of leadership, and of courage. Takoda looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with pride. "You are ready, Sarah," he said, his voice steady and strong. "You are not just a protector now. You are a true leader of our people." Sarah felt a surge of emotion as she stood among her people, the weight of the battle still heavy on her shoulders, but her heart swelling with pride. This was her tribe, her family, and they had faced the storm together. The future was still uncertain, but Sarah knew one thing for sure. They would face it together, and nothing would break their bond. The battle was over, but the dust had barely settled before new challenges began to rise. As Sarah stood among the warriors of her tribe, her heart still racing from the chaos of the fight, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was yet to come. The enemy had been repelled, yes, but their leader's defeat was just one victory in what felt like a much larger war. Sarah's thoughts raced as she looked around, at the wounded being tended to, the bodies of fallen warriors, and the quiet determination that hung in the air. The tribe had endured much already, and now it was time for them to rebuild, to prepare for whatever threats might arise in the future. Takoda had been by her side throughout the battle, and now, he stood with her, surveying the aftermath. His face, usually a mask of calm, showed signs of strain, his eyes reflecting the toll the fight had taken on him. "We have won, but the war is far from over," Takoda said, his voice heavy. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The battle may have been won, but the peace they had fought for was fragile, and the world outside their camp was unpredictable. "What comes next?" Sarah asked, her voice steady, though her heart was still unsettled. Takoda turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "We rebuild, we mourn our losses, and we prepare. There are more battles ahead, and we must stand ready." The tribe had already begun to work, setting up camp again, burying their dead, and tending to the wounded. But Sarah knew that the true rebuilding wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. The tribe had suffered, had bled, and now they needed to heal. She had seen the strength of her people on the battlefield, but now, it was time for them to be strong in other ways. Sarah knew that her role was more than just fighting. She was a leader, a protector, and it was her duty to guide her people through these hard times. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah worked tirelessly alongside Takoda, meeting with the tribe's elders, helping to organize their efforts, and learning more about the intricacies of leadership. Her days were filled with lessons on strategy, on negotiation, on what it meant to be a true leader. But every day, the weight of her new responsibility grew heavier. One evening, As the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, Sarah found herself standing alone outside the camp. She needed a moment of peace, a brief respite from the endless demands of leadership. The desert stretched out before her, vast and silent, the wind whispering through the dunes. She closed her eyes, letting the stillness wash over her. In that moment, Sarah realized that the calm she sought would never come as long as she carried the burden of leadership. There would always be more battles, more decisions to make, more lives to protect. But she also understood that this was the path she had chosen, and she would face it with everything she had. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for a future, for her people, for a legacy that would carry on long after her. As the days passed, Sarah began to grow more into her role. She worked closely with Takoda and the tribe's elders, learning how to balance the needs of the people with the realities of the world around them. There were moments when doubt crept in, when Sarah questioned her abilities, but each time, she reminded herself of the strength she had found within her. One afternoon, as she sat with the warriors, discussing their next steps, Takoda approached her. His face was calm, but there was a hint of something in his eyes, something she had come to recognize as his quiet pride. "You are doing well, Sarah," he said simply. His words meant more to her than anything else. She had fought hard to prove herself, and in that moment, she realized that her journey was only just beginning. Takoda's words resonated with her, but they also reminded her of the path still ahead. There was still much to do, many challenges to overcome. And though the tribe had triumphed, the future was uncertain. As the sun set on another long day, Sarah found herself standing once more at the edge of the camp, staring into the horizon. The stars began to appear, one by one, and the desert seemed to breathe around her. She could feel the weight of the tribe's future in her hands, and yet, there was a sense of calm that settled over her. She knew that whatever came next, she was ready. Takoda had always said that leadership was about more than just strength. It was about resilience, about standing firm even when the world seemed to be shifting beneath your feet. Sarah had seen that resilience in her people, and now, she saw it in herself. The battle was over, but the journey was far from done. She was no longer just a protector. She was the leader of the tribe. And no matter what the future held, Sarah was ready to face it head-on, with courage, determination, and the unshakable belief that they could weather any storm as long as they stood together. The days grew colder as the wind swept across the desert, carrying with it the dust of the past and the promise of change. Sarah stood with Takoda on a rise above the camp, gazing out at the vast expanse before them. The tribe had been quiet since the battle, working in their own way to heal, rebuild, and prepare for whatever was to come. Sarah had assumed the role of leader, but the weight of that responsibility felt heavier with each passing day. She had proven herself in the heat of battle, but now, she faced the even more difficult task of leading the tribe through peace, an uncertain peace that was fragile and could easily be shattered. As Sarah looked out across the land, she felt a deep connection to it, to the history that had shaped the tribe and to the future they were now building. But even as they worked to rebuild, the shadows of war still loomed over them. Takoda had spoken of the rumors, of the unrest among neighboring tribes, and Sarah knew the danger was not yet behind them. The tribe's survival was still at risk. "You've done well, Sarah," Takoda said, his voice steady, as always. "But there's still much to do. We cannot afford to grow complacent. The future of our people depends on our strength, our unity, and our resolve." Sarah turned to him, meeting his gaze. There was a fire in his eyes, one that had never wavered, even in the darkest of times. He had taught her how to fight, how to lead, and now he was teaching her the hardest lesson of all, how to keep the peace, how to build something lasting from the ashes of war. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice steady. "But sometimes, it feels like no matter how much we do, there is always something waiting to tear us apart." Takoda smiled softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That is the burden of leadership, but it is also the strength of our people. As long as we stand together, we will endure. Together, we will shape our future." Sarah nodded, taking in his words. She had grown strong, not just in battle, but in her understanding of what it meant to lead. And with each passing day, she felt more deeply connected to the tribe, to the land, and to Takoda, who had been her guide in this new world. The next morning, The camp was alive with activity. The warriors were training, the women were tending to the crops, and the children were learning the ways of their people. Sarah watched them all with a sense of pride. The tribe was strong, stronger than it had been in years. But she knew that their strength would be tested again, and soon. As she walked among the people, Sarah felt the weight of her decisions, of the future she was now responsible for. She had made promises to them, to protect them, to guide them, and she would not fail. The first real test of her leadership came just a few days later. A messenger arrived from a neighboring tribe, bearing troubling news. They had heard of the tribe's victory and the strength of their warriors. The messenger came not with an offer of peace, but with a challenge. The neighboring tribe wanted to test their strength, to see if the tribe could truly defend itself. It was an invitation to battle, but one that Sarah could not ignore. If they refused, it would be seen as a sign of weakness, a failure to uphold their honor. If they accepted, it would mean another fight for survival. Sarah knew that this was the moment that would define her leadership. She gathered the tribe's elders and warriors around the fire, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. Takoda stood by her side, offering his quiet support. "We cannot let them question our strength," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We have already fought for our survival, but now we must show them that we will not be intimidated. We will defend our people, our land, and our future." The tribe murmured in agreement, their resolve firm. Sarah could see the strength in their eyes, the same fire that had burned in her during the battle. They were ready, just as she was. "We will fight," she said, her voice resolute. "We will fight for our future." The days that followed were filled with preparations. Sarah worked alongside Takoda, coordinating the tribe's defenses, organizing their warriors, and preparing for the battle that would come. It was not just about fighting. It was about proving that their victory was not a fluke, that they were a force to be reckoned with. As the enemy tribe drew closer, Sarah felt the same tension in the air that she had felt before. The battle was imminent, but this time, she was not just fighting for survival. She was fighting for everything the tribe had worked for everything they had built together. The night before the battle, Sarah stood once more on the rise, looking out over the land. The wind blew softly, the stars shining brightly above. She was no longer just the outsider who had stumbled into their world. She was one of them now, a leader, a protector. The future of the tribe was in her hands, and she would do everything in her power to ensure that they would not fall. Takoda joined her, standing silently by her side. "Tomorrow, we face our future," he said quietly. "But no matter what happens, know that we will face it together." Sarah turned to him, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. "Together," she echoed. And with that, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The fire of the tribe was burning strong, and Sarah was ready to lead them into the future, no matter the cost. The day of the battle arrived with a heavy silence that hung over the tribe like a storm cloud. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp once more, staring out at the horizon where the enemy's forces had gathered. The air was thick with tension, and the sense of impending conflict weighed heavily on her chest. Takoda stood by her side, as he had through every challenge they had faced together. He had been her guide, her protector, and now they were partners in this fight for the future of their people. "Are we ready?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but laced with the weight of the decision she had made. Takoda's eyes, usually calm and measured, were now filled with a quiet fire. "We are," he replied simply. The warriors were lined up behind them, the men and women of the tribe, ready to defend everything they had fought for. The preparations had been meticulous, each warrior trained, each defense set in place. The time for words had passed. Now, there was only action. As Sarah looked over the tribe, she saw their faces filled with resolve. They had trusted her, followed her into battle, and now they were ready to fight for their future. She had led them to this point, and now it was time to see if they could truly defend what they had built. The enemy tribe approached, their war cries piercing the silence of the desert. The time had come. Sarah's heart raced, but she knew she had made the right decision. She had prepared her people, and now it was time for them to show the strength that had brought them this far. The battle began with a deafening clash. Sarah moved swiftly, her movements practiced, her instincts sharp. She could hear the battle cries of the warriors around her, the sound of weapons clashing, the cries of the wounded. But in the midst of the chaos, Sarah stayed focused. She could see Takoda, his form cutting through the fray like a shadow, his presence a steady reminder that she was not alone in this fight. They fought together, side by side, the tribes standing united against the enemy. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, the heat of the desert sun beating down on them, but neither side would relent. Sarah fought with all her strength, her bow and sword in hand, every motion fueled by the desire to protect her people. Her warriors fought with the same determination, each one a fierce defender of their home. As the battle continued, the tide slowly began to turn. The enemy's forces, though fierce, began to falter. Their attacks grew weaker, their resolve crumbling in the face of the tribe's unity. Sarah could see it, the moment when their strength had won out, when the enemy realized they could not break through the resolve of the tribe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the enemy began to retreat, their warriors falling back in disarray. The tribe's warriors pressed forward, their spirits unbroken, their victory now inevitable. When the last of the enemy forces had fled, the desert was quiet again, save for the sound of the tribe's warriors catching their breath. The battle had been won. Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the tribe began to regroup, tending to their wounded and gathering the fallen. The victory was theirs, but it came at a cost. The bodies of their enemies were scattered across the battlefield, but Sarah's heart ached as she saw the faces of her own warriors, the sacrifices they had made. Takoda approached her, his expression grim but proud. "You led them well," he said, his voice steady. Sarah nodded, her chest tight with emotion. "We did it together," she replied. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us." Takoda placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are the heart of this tribe, Sarah. You have proven that you are not just a protector, but a leader in every sense of the word." Sarah looked out at the tribe, the people she had come to call family. They had fought together, and now they had won. The journey had been long, filled with hardship, but they had come through stronger than ever. The future was still uncertain, but Sarah knew one thing for sure: they would face it together. The tribe's victory was not just a triumph on the battlefield, it was a triumph of unity, of strength, and of leadership. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the camp, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The war was not over, but this battle had been a turning point. The tribe had proven their strength, their resolve, and their commitment to one another. They had faced the storm, and together, they had weathered it. Sarah turned to Takoda, her heart full. "We've done it," she said quietly. Takoda nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yes," he said. "Together we have." As the night settled over the desert, Sarah stood among her people, her heart filled with pride. The future was uncertain, but as long as they stood together, she knew they could face anything that came their way. In this captivating journey through the wild and untamed lands, we follow Sarah, a young woman thrust into leadership amidst the challenges of survival and unity. As she navigates the harsh realities of tribal life and battles for her people's future, this story brings to life the essence of Western stories. From the first battle that proves her worth to the moments of doubt and decision, Sarah's transformation into a leader is nothing short of inspiring. Through fierce conflicts and the quiet moments of reflection, Sarah learns what it truly means to protect and guide a community. With Takoda by her side, the two face both internal and external battles, leading the tribe to victory. These Western stories are filled with bravery, leadership, and the unbreakable bonds of unity that shape the future of a people. As Sarah stands at the crossroads of destiny, her courage and resolve shine brightly, proving that in the world of Western stories, true strength comes from standing together. With each challenge, Sarah proves that the heart of the tribe beats stronger than ever, ready to face whatever lies ahead in the vast, unforgiving frontier.